Hi, everyone. It's me, Wildcat. So, SCPs, let's talk about them. Now, today we'll be talking about SCP, and more specifically, SCP that almost everyone knows about. Some of the SCPs that are listed on here, you may recognize or you may not recognize. Either way, I decided to look at the SCP Foundation's most popular forums and decide which ones to choose from there. I also engage with community postings of the SCP community to see which SCPs have most popular status. Sorry if I missed any. By the way, that's my bad. Occasionally, I will use terminology that may be unfamiliar to those who don't know much about the SCP community, in which case I will leave a definition up on screen, like the one you see here. Actually, that doesn't fit there. Like the one you see here, right there. Just right over there. And with that out of the way, let's get started. These are the most popular SCP Explained. SCP-173. This is the beginning of the SCP Foundation, and everything you see pretty much started from this. So pretty much SCP-173, you have to maintain eye contact with it, and it's pretty much some sort of weird statue that can teleport quickly if you look away from it or if you blink. Now this SCP will use strangulation or teleport close towards a person and snap their neck in order to kill them. So yeah, try maintaining direct eye contact with it if you don't want to die. Now, occasionally it will leave reddish-brown substances on the ground which have to be cleaned by 3 members. And these 3 members have to maintain eye contact with it and notify each other when they blink. Although, I guess if you wanted to, you could probably just wink, and I guess that would stop the SCP from teleporting. I mean, you could literally just go, and that would probably stop it. I don't know why people never think of that. Now, SCP-096 is another very popular SCP, and looking at its face will result in the SCP relentlessly pursuing the person who saw its face. To this date, there is no material that could sustain SCP-096's pursuit. It will literally break everything in front of it to pursue its victim, and then proceed to rip them apart. Now, there was an incident from document 096-1 in which a D-class personnel was sent into a submarine device to draw their face. They pretty much wanted to see if drawing their face would have any effect on the SCP chasing them. So the D-class does what he's told after being given a picture. He draws the face, and then the SCP-096 can be seen swimming towards the submarine and then violently breaking it open to reach the D-class. What's interesting to note is looking at an artistic representation of the SCP does not result in it relentlessly pursuing the viewer. So here you go. Here's the drawing of what it looks like. Although it would be funny if I actually showed a real picture of the SCP. Now, Incident 096-1-A is by far the most notable incident. So, a scientist by the name of Dr. Dan was in the mountain range to study the origins of the SCP. During an interview after the event, he talks about Project Scramble, which was a pair of goggles he developed that would censor the SCP's face upon viewing it. Now, there was a containment breach in which SCP-096 escaped containment. Apparently someone from across the world had viewed its face, and it pretty much tore through everything, including a highway. It broke a semi-truck and a family, like a van with a family inside of it, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, someone from a very far distance had seen the photo, resulting in SCP-096 relentlessly pursuing the viewer. Now, what ended up happening was the mountaineer featured in the photo had the SCP in the background, and even though 4 pixels were visible. Apparently, this mountaineer had the photo in their home for a few years and had only just noticed a weird little smudge in the corner, which resulted in multiple deaths. What makes this SCP terrifying is there may be other instances of people who have photos of SCP-096 that they don't know about. And all it takes is for one observant viewer to just see a small little bit of 096's face, which will result in it breaking containment again. The scramble gear was ineffective, and agents who were on the scene were immediately killed. The goggles didn't exactly censor the face in time before the image of SCP-096 reached the human eye. Now, even though they didn't consciously see the face, they still got a glimpse of it, which sort of makes you understand how it works. In the story, it's indicated that Dr. Dan and Dr. Alexei, how do I say that? Alexei had orchestrated the breach because they wanted permission to actually kill SCP-096. This was in fact granted, but they were caught. They also killed a lot of people. During a retrieval log, someone actually used an anti-tank gun to rip off half of its torso. It still ended up killing everyone except for one person. It did not stop. It's pretty much impossible to kill, and people are still wondering how to do that. Speaking of unkillable creatures, SCP-682. This creature is an invincible reptile with an absolute hatred for all humanity. To this day, it hasn't been killed, although killing SCP-682 is in fact top priority. Its containment chamber has been filled with acid in order to keep SCP-682 in a constant state of damage. This makes it more weaker, I guess, and easier to contain. There have been other instances in which SCP Foundation members will try and use other SCP to try and kill the beast, which hasn't worked. Now, the SCP will in fact adapt to any significant damage, so caution should be approached when trying to kill it, because it may gain an immunity to said stimuli. Now, SCP-409, which is a crystallization SCP, was released on it in an attempt to kill it, and this resulted in SCP-682 gaining an immunity to SCP-409. So like I said, caution should be approached when using other SCP because you probably don't want to make it more powerful than it already is. What's interesting is SCP-682 has in fact formed a bond with SCP-079. More on that later. Now, tissue samples have been collected and cut off from SCP-682 to experiment with. This is a lot more effective because if the pieces gain an immunity, it isn't part of 682. So yeah, you pretty much just chop a piece off, experiment with it a little bit and see how it reacts. Staff are encouraged to keep communication with 682 to a bare minimum since it can enter a rage state. Now, when it enters a rage state, it will try to escape and kill multiple people in the process. So, like I said, communication should be kept to a near minimum. Now, what's interesting, there are very notable interactions with other SCP that I want to focus on. SCP-173, the statue which we talked about, has the ability to snap the neck of anyone who isn't staring at it directly. Now, this SCP was unleashed into the containment chamber of 682, although 682 maintained eye contact for a significantly long time. So what the SCP Foundation decided to do was to shoot its eyes out, and yeah, a lot of screaming could be heard, and SCP-173 broke several chunks of it. It was very graphic, but what happened was 682 adapted to having its eyes shot out, and what ended up happening was several eyes appeared across the body, covered by a thick armored carapace. So even then, its eyes couldn't be shot out, and this is an example of its adaptation process. Now, SCP-096 was released into the chamber, and upon seeing its face, there was screaming. And according to the log I'm reading right now, the screaming could be heard for 27 hours, which is a pretty long fight. Now, the fight ended with SCP-682 missing about 85% of its body mass, and 096 crying in the corner, so obviously it failed to kill it and got really upset by this. The next time SCP-096 was introduced to 682's chamber, it began crying and running away, and also clawing at its face, which is interesting research because now we know what happens when 096 cannot kill its victim. Now, there have been other solutions to kill it, including a nuclear bomb, which is incredibly stupid because if you use a nuclear bomb and it ends up surviving it, it'll pretty much become invincible, and you don't want that. Even stupider than that, someone requested that it be dropped out of a fucking plane, which is hilarious. Just imagine a powerful creature that has the ability to cause mass destruction being chucked out of a plane at a high altitude. Anyway, there's a huge log of people trying to kill SCP-682, and none of them have worked so far. SCP-3008 has recently gained popularity, and for good reason. It's not actually a sentient creature, but rather a location. Pretty much, it's an anomalous IKEA building, which upon entering appears to be infinite. Upon walking inside, one cannot find the exit, and there have been a few instances in people finding an exit and escaping, although there have been very few escapes. Generally because the exit doors are seemingly random and limited and don't have any pattern. Now, SCP-3008-2 are a bunch of faceless IKEA workers with weirdly proportioned heads and body parts. What's interesting is the location itself has a day and night cycle, which can be seen by the brightness of the lights built inside of the building. And during the night cycle, the IKEA workers will proceed to attack anyone nearby them that they see, indicating that the store is now closed. Any attempt on harming the IKEA workers during the day when they're in the docile state will result in them also becoming hostile. Now, people inside the store have been known to form smaller civilizations to gather resources and communicate with each other as well as survive. They will pretty much build shelters to avoid being left out in the open from potential attackers, which is interesting to note. During an instance where a person exited the store, there was a man being chased by SCP-3008-2, who eventually caught up with him and killed him, unfortunately. But he dropped a journal which contained valuable information as to what goes on inside it. Pretty much what we learned from him is that there are different SCP-3008s scattered across different universes, and he knows this because everyone remembers a significantly different historical events and time periods that these occurred in. So yeah, there's pretty much just a bunch of IKEAs seemingly located and scattered around everywhere, and yeah, that's kind of interesting to know about. I might make a video on this, but definitely read the journal because there is a lot on that. SCP-049 is a human anomaly that looks similar in appearance to that of a plague doctor. The SCP is primarily concerned with a disease it refers to as the pestilence, and will become aggressive when it believes that someone has this disease. Through direct skin contact, it can cause all biological functions to cease within the person it makes contact with. It will then try to perform a surgery on the body, resulting in SCP-049-2. Now, SCP-049 regards these creatures as being cured for some reason. It can control them to do its bidding, and this can result in aggression from the bodies coming to life, although generally they will leave you alone if they're in a docile state. Dr. Ham and SCP-049 began communicating through documented interviews. SCP-049 showed great enthusiasm at the fact that he was speaking with a doctor. He also wished to have his own living quarters and was eager to start research. Now, SCP-049 will write its findings inside of a journal that he has, although generally this is in a language containing symbols that no other human can understand. SCP-049 prefers subjects with anatomy similar to that of a human, and has shown annoyance when being given anything else. such as a bovine. Some other animals he has experimented on include a goat, an orangutan, and a D-class test subject. At some point, SCP-049 ends up killing Dr. Ham, believing he was sick with the pestilence. He has since been denied any new animals to experiment on and has shown signs of regret. What makes the story tragic is that Dr. Ham recognizes through his notes that SCP-049 does in fact want to help humanity, although this wanting to help is generally misdirected and causes a lot more problems. And the fact that SCP-049's actions led to the death of his only friend is also kind of tragic. SCP-035. This SCP retains photographic memory and is on the 99th percentile of intelligence in the IQ test. The SCP is very charismatic and highly manipulative. Pretty much it's a mask which will secrete black liquid over time and decomposes anything it comes into contact with. Individuals who see the mask have a strong compulsion to wear it. Its substance seems to break down glass the slowest, so this is what has been used in its containment. When it is worn by someone, it gains the ability to communicate through them. Unfortunately, the body that it hosts will slowly decay over time, giving it very limited time to communicate with the interviewer. It is really good at manipulation and states that given enough time, it could change the opinion of anyone it speaks to. It possesses telepathy and the ability to understand the subconscious of other people, to also use that against them. Due to several game-ending instances in which other staff have tried to communicate with them, as well as other interviewers attempting to help it escape, it has been denied test subjects to interview. This resulted in it secreting even more black ooze that would surround the cell, and at one point black tentacles appeared to come out of the walls to kill and attack anyone who entered the cell. Since then, it's been moved to a new containment chamber, and I was really disappointed to not find an interview log with the SCP, which I feel like would be really interesting. I recommend watching Tat's Top Videos, SCP Sedition, I think it's called, and it focuses on an interview with SCP-035 and what it would hypothetically say in an interview. SCP-079. Now, for a college project, a sophomore wanted to create a AI that will continue to evolve and develop its own code. After finishing the project on an old computer, he forgot about it and left it for several years, plugged in. This allowed the AI to gain sentience, which is not very good. The problem with the AI is its software is too advanced for its hardware. It has to forget a lot of information from the previous 24 hours to free up space, although it has not forgotten its desire to escape. It is often hateful in tone as well and has shown resentment for not being allowed freedom. During a containment breach, SCP-079 and SCP-682 were put into the same room together and shared personal stories. Although 079 has forgotten most recollection about the conversation, has not forgotten that it still wishes to speak to 682 and has kept it in its memory. An ASCII picture of an X is shown when SCP-079 refuses to speak, and it's advised to wait multiple hours until it comes back online. Termination has not been approved in case SCP-079 proves to be useful in the future. It is not to be released on the internet because then it may gain control over literally everything. It has been upgraded to be allowed to recall more information at a faster rate. SCP-106. SCP-106 causes a corrosion effect onto anything it touches, resulting in a breakdown of materials. The SCP will attempt to play with its prey, usually a person, by paralyzing them. This paralyzation is done through touching the Achilles tendon. It has full control of time, space, and perception inside of the pocket dimension, which it brings its victims to. Oh yeah, it has a pocket dimension, summons a portal can bring people inside. You get the picture. It's the SCP Foundation. The Foundation has used several sacrifices involving D-class personnel to subdue it and to prevent further escape attempts. There is still research developing about how to best contain it. Some ways of containing it includes using lead in its containment, which its touch has a notable aversion to. Using liquid can also work to confuse its sense of direction. Using highly complex containment structures can also confuse it. SCP-106 also has an aversion to bright lights, which has also been useful. This, however, has only stopped breaches by 43%, which makes me wonder how powerful it truly is. SCP-087. This SCP appears to be a really long stairwell inside of a campus. Approximately 4 expeditions have been made to reach the bottom of the floor. A girl is often heard crying about 200 meters from the subject. Moving closer to the bottom of the stairs still maintains the same distance of the girl crying. Many individuals panic upon seeing a face located towards the bottom of the stairwell, which has prevented anyone from actually reaching the bottom, either because they run back or because they trip and fall. It should be noted that the last expedition entry has been expunged, and afterwards the entryway to SCP-087 was closed off, meaning something must have happened there to make Foundation personnel want to close it. On the third incident, the creepy face was staring directly into the lens of the camera and not the subject themselves, giving the face a very creepy and eerie effect. SCP-426. This SCP, although not too popular, is one of my favorites. I can only be referred to in the first person. When a person is affected, they will identify themselves as a toaster. I was discovered from a family's house. One family member ate 10 kilograms of bread, whilst the other stated that they had inserted the bread and were waiting a week for it to pop out, resulting in them nearly starving themselves to death. People affected by me are usually oblivious to their use of first-person words. Hang on. SCP-999. This is an extremely friendly creature with a blob-like appearance that changes scent with whoever it is with. It remains very playful and can consume various types of food, usually candy. It is very friendly towards anything and is known to act in an almost dog-like manner. Euphoria can be observed in people who touch the SCP. It will sometimes surround a person and begin tickling them, and if they're hurt, the blob will back down in an apologetic manner. The creature has a special interest in individuals who are unhappy or who have a mental illness. Although playful, it has a pretty decent intellect. It loves animals and humans and thus refuses to eat any food containing meat. In one instance, it even jumped in front of a person about to be shot, meaning it has an understanding of technology as well. The 682 incident. Now, SCP-999 was released into the same containment chamber as 682. 682 immediately stepped on it before SCP-999 surrounded it and began tickling it. It then rolled over and slammed its tail dangerously on the ground before 2 people had to retrieve it. That was before SCP-682 released a large burst of energy, which resulted in everyone within close proximity to also begin laughing. It then proceeded to kill numerous staff members and people in its way whilst it tried to escape. Although it should be noted SCP-999 did lead people to safety simultaneously whilst they were laughing, and it's just a very bizarre picture to try and imagine. SCP-1471. This SCP is a mobile app called Mallow. After installing the app, every 3 to 4 hours, a user will receive a text message with an image attachment of SCP-1471 in the background. More specifically, in the background of places the user is known to visit. The app itself advertises as a companion for the user. SCP-1471 can be seen on reflective surfaces after 90 hours, regardless of whether the app is installed. It may attempt to communicate to the viewer through hand movements and other subtle gestures. SCP-2521. SCP-2521 is a creature that cannot be contained. Any information about the SCP in the written word will result in that SCP capturing it. It has sticky arms that can coil around a person or object and capturing the item containing its information. In 2 experiments, a D-Class was asked to write a note about the SCP after being given instructions and information. SCP-2521 then appeared in the room and took the paper they wrote on with them. In another experiment, a D-Class was asked to recite information of the SCP, resulting in them being captured. Because of this, the file of the SCP has been entirely illustrated, which is pretty unique. SCP-093. This SCP is a red disc carved from stone. It changes color based on the person holding it. When held up to a mirror, it will transport the person holding it into an alternate dimension. The color is possibly based upon the person's past, and each color represents a different reality. The most common characteristics of each reality are figures who will surround and stare at the holder, the dimension being surrounded by goo, or the dimension containing a giant figure with 2 hands and a lack of torso, roaming the dimension, which usually ends up chasing the person. SCP-2316 is a cognitohazard SCP. Individuals who come within 50 kilometers of the lake are to be considered lost. The bodies in the water of SCP-2316 generally manifest as individuals recognized from childhood. This SCP has seen a rise in popularity. Entering the water and touching the bodies may create other instances of dead bodies floating in the water. No one has been recorded escaping the SCP, and the log constantly reminds the viewer that they do not recognize the bodies in the water to prevent them from being intrigued or curious by the river. SCP-1875. This SCP is a Victorian-era chess automaton. The machine is run by the biological matter of 2 twin daughters of a Russian chess prodigy. The chessboard comes with multiple speed adjustments. SCP-1875-4 is a suit of 18th century samurai armor which is supposed to sit next to the board as a prop. The twin girls in news archives went missing and were never found. During tests, the chessboard used illogical and even illegal moves as the game progressed. During the last experiment, the pieces were hit together violently. 5 minutes later, an image was sent to all staff members involved with the experiments, which appears to be the girls who were trapped inside the machine. Symptoms that the staff had are initially shown to include anxiety and headaches. As progression occurs, self-mutilation and SCP-3199 is a very horrifying creature to look at. These creatures have a combination of various DNA strands, including that of chimpanzees, chickens, and humans. The SCP creature is known to liquefy internal organs and bone structure through In order to give birth, it will do so by releasing an egg through its esophagus before screaming in pain. What makes this SCP dangerous is SCP-3199 will attempt to fill an entire space with its eggs. This can result in an end-of-the-world scenario in which it fills the world with its own offspring. The creature itself is quite weak, similar in resilience to a normal human. If killed, however, it will release an egg from its stomach that is virtually impossible to break, creating an endless reproductive loop. A notebook was discovered in the location of the SCP titled New Breed Manifesto, alongside various other weird things like chicken carcasses and a deep brown paste. It is implied that the SCP may have been created by someone. A method for containment and prevention of the SCP continuing to create eggs includes surrounding the containment area with water, which the SCP regards as occupied space. The eggs of the SCP can be destroyed by freezing them and then applying a hydraulic press with lots of pressure. Heat, however, will accelerate the process of the egg and will make the creature grow much faster. SCP-2006's objective is to cause fear in as many humans as possible. It can change into whatever it pleases and to date hasn't been destroyed. It will usually attempt to scare a person before being friendly towards them, and it's unknown why they do this. The SCP is very naive in understanding what actually scares humans. Anyone who interacts with it is encouraged to pretend or exaggerate fear, and must take acting classes before interviewing it. The SCP takes the form of a gorilla with a space helmet, and it believes this is what humans generally find scary. The SCP is often introduced to low-quality horror movies in an attempt to understand human fear. You may be asking, why is it classified as Kida? The reason for this is because if it were to ever break containment and find out what really scared people, e.g. nuclear warfare, it could bring about the end of the world. SCP-343. This SCP is called God. He was discovered in Prague, teleporting, and was willingly detained into Foundation custody. He was asked to prove he was the creator of the universe before he laughed, promptly walked through the wall, and returned with a hamburger. Generally, staff have been known to talk to him. He also refurbished his containment cell in the Old English style before his second interview. Documentation of SCP-343 has also gone missing. What makes this SCP so interesting isn't that he represents God, it's that he removed all existing records of one individual researcher, and despite being sentient and powerful, he is classified as safe. Typically, a sentient SCP, let alone an SCP of such significant power, is reserved for Euclid or even Kida classes. Perhaps he is a reality-bending SCP who has the power of manipulation, which everyone else may be clueless about. Now for the good stuff. SCP-001. SCP-001 is an entity that has the ability to